Let's go to the Boardwalk Honda hotline, check in with our 97.3 ESPN.com Sixers reporter, Michael Kaskey-Blomain. As the Sixers' summer team is not very good, by the way. Their point guard play is dreadful.
30, man. They were 30.
Yeah.
That was the number next to their name, 30.
Worst.
That was their motivation last night, according to, who was it? Isaiah Miles?
Sure. Let's bring in MKB and get some thoughts on the summer team. But more importantly, this roster now, Michael, you got a lot of interesting decisions coming up. Obviously they're kind of capped out. This looks like the team, save for a big trade. There was some Woj bombs last night, some moves being made in the NBA, so things could still happen. But the Sixers are going to have some decisions to make here with the amount of players they have and what they have left here. Who are some interesting roster crunches and battles we should be seeing at the end of when training camp starts?
Mike, I think it'll be a lot of the guys down at the bottom of the roster. I mean, obviously, the starting five is pretty well set. It'll be, barring a big trade like you alluded to, it'll be, the same as it was last year. The rotation will be similar, for the first 6-7 guys. But then obviously with, Irsan and Marco gone, I think you'll see a lot of guys kind of competing. I think Wilson Chandler will probably slide into that, versatile backup forward role spot. Amir will probably have his same backup role. TJ will probably be the backup guard. But then you're looking at guys, like TLC, who will probably be fighting for his roster life. Korkmaz obviously it'll be interesting to see if he gets a spot or if he's part of a two-way situation again based off how he's been playing in Summer League. Jonah Bolden, is supposed to be part of the roster. He'll be another guy that could be, maybe slated for a two-way. So I think it'll be pretty interesting to see how the rotation itself behind the starting five, shakes out once training camp rolls around.
Yeah, now what is the deal? You got the two guys with the non-guaranteed contracts, Rashawn and TJ. How will that affect their them making this roster?
I think it will affect, I think especially Rashawn. I think there's a real chance that contract doesn't become guaranteed and they kind of let him walk. I just don't think that they've seen enough that they feel like he can be a legitimate contributor to the rotation at this point in time. I think the non-guaranteed status of his contract particularly is a pretty big factor. TJ also could be a factor if, for some reason they needed to clear a little bit more either cap space or a roster spot. But as it stands right now with the roster as it is, I would imagine TJ, especially coming off of how he performed in the playoffs last year, stepping in, into a starting role and then a big-time role off the bench. I would expect him to be, back with the team for the season.
Yeah, I mean, you look at that guard spot, you got Ben Simmons, Fultz most likely contributing in that role. They drafted Shamet in the first round. He probably could be a G League guy, but he is a first-round pick, which means his contract is there. And then you got McConnell. Bayless most likely be gone. So is there any possibility, and no one's suggesting they want to see this happen, but that McConnell could be squeezed somehow?
Yeah, Mike, I do think that's a legitimate possibility. Like you said, there's definitely kind of a lot of guards on the roster right now, especially with Markelle coming back. If he's able to stay in the lineup and contribute to the extent that a lot of us are expecting, that'll eat up into what would have been TJ's minutes, by a lot. We saw that last year when Markelle came back to the rotation. It took a big chunk out of TJ's minutes, and he kind of became a third guard. So, if you factor in him, Shamet, and then, Zaire, who's going to be seeing some guard minutes too, I think there's a legit possibility. With that being said, we all know, Brett is very fond of TJ. He's a guy that's very familiar, obviously, with the system, having been around the team for the past, 3-4 years. So, like you said, it's not something we would like to see happen. I don't expect it to happen right now. I do think he will be on the roster, but it's certainly not something that's, out of the realm of possibilities.
Talking with Michael Kaskey-Blomain here on the Boardwalk Honda hotline. And, obviously the competition level is going up. Are there any guys from this current Summer League team that you think will be a regular rotation player?
Outside of Zaire, probably not. I think we can expect to see Zaire get some legitimate minutes throughout the course of the season. Furkan is another guy that it's pretty intriguing, especially after losing Ilyasova and Bellinelli. Obviously, he came out, dropped 40 in the first game. He had 18 last night. We all know he can shoot. That was something we've known since he was drafted. It's a matter of, the consistency on a nightly basis and the other aspects, the physicality, the defensive end. So he's a guy that I think if they see some of that from him, he could potentially crack the rotation, being that he could space the floor and do some of the things that a guy like Marco did for the team last year. But outside of those two, it's really tough to see just how, with the depth of the roster already, Jonah Bolden hasn't necessarily done anything in Summer League that makes me think that he's going to be playing, legitimate minutes for the team, at least right off the bat. And, Shamit's obviously been injured, so we haven't seen too much from him. But outside of Zaire, who I expect to probably be within the top 10, 12 in the rotation, and potentially Furkan, we probably won't see any of these guys get actual regular minutes.
Michael, do you see a scenario where Dario comes off the bench?
You know what, Pete? Not now. I don't think so, unless, if there's some changes further get made to the roster potentially. But I think right now, if they go into the season with the lineup that's currently constructed, I think he'll remain in that starting power forward spot as a guy that can, kind of space the floor and mix it up a little bit down low. I think his versatility definitely makes him an option that if he needed to come off the bench, it's something they could do. But I think, we saw last year and the year before he played, I think is better as a starter as opposed to when he was backing up Yersan. I think he really gets into the rhythm and really feeds pretty well off of Ben and Joel. I think the three of them have a nice, chemistry that they've developed. So, barring any other major roster moves, I would expect the starting lineup to be pretty much the same five that we saw throughout the majority of the season last year.
What do you see the roles then being for a Wilson Chandler or a Nemanja Bjelica?
I think nice pronunciation there, Pete. I could tell you've been practicing, by the way. But
yes, I have.
I think Nemanja will probably have a similar role to as people have been saying, to what Ersan did last year in terms of backing up Dario, coming in as another stretch forward that could space, maybe slide down to the three if necessary. And same with Wilson Chandler. I think he'll be the guy that will come in it's back up small forward role behind Robert Covington and provide that similar versatility on both ends of the floor. A guy that can get after it defensively, knock down shots. He can probably get to the rim a little bit better than Robert too. So I could see some particular situations where they might opt to have Wilson in the game over Covington. In particular situations if they're looking for a certain type of offense. But I think both of those guys will be really, key contributors in the second unit and kind of taking over the roles of a couple of the guys that they lost in free agency.
Now, Michael, you mentioned Bolden, and he's been kind of disappointing, at least on the offense. And I thought he was pretty good defensively against Ayton last night, pretty good rim protection. Do you anticipate him being one of the 15 guys?
Mike, I don't think I do. I'd be interested to see exactly where he fits. But as it stands right now, with Amir coming back, Rashawn still being a question mark, and Bjelica on the roster now, I just don't see where he fits into the front court as one of the 15 guys. Maybe he could be a G League guy or a two-way guy for a time being if an opportunity opens up. But he just looked. I thought he looked promising on the defensive end as well, like you did. But I think he just looked a little bit. I guess unpolished or, not like he just looks like he has a little bit of work to do on his game overall before he could comfortably, really come and contribute to a team. Now that, it's just funny comparatively to the past couple of years, a guy like him potentially could come in and really contribute. But now we're looking at a team that's going to legitimately be competing for, the top seed in the Eastern Conference and a potential finals appearance. And I just don't see the space where they have he has the room to come in and learn on the go like that.
It'll be interesting because of the contract situation for some of the. I mean, you got Embiid, Simmons, Sarge, Covington, Redick, Fultz, Chandler, Bjelica, Amir, Zaire Smith, and then Shamit, Justin Anderson. Is he in, out? Furkan, Bolden. That's 14. And then you got TLC, McConnell, Holmes, Bayless, and Shake Milton.
Yeah, I mean, that's a lot of guys right there. Obviously, training camp will be, kind of the deciding factor for a lot of those guys. Justin Anderson is another one that, we haven't even mentioned. It's kind of been, it seems almost like a forgotten man. He was injured, obviously had the surgery, but he, played pretty well for the team in the playoffs. Kind of is the versatile stretch, like three guy that Brett Brown likes off the bench. So he's another guy that'll be interesting to see. I feel like Wilson Chandler kind of does a lot of the same things. So it'll be interesting to see if there's a spot for him when the season comes around. I wouldn't be shocked to see him, not being on that final 15-man roster just because of the squeeze at this point. But obviously Shake Milton's a guy that we would like to see some more of. But I don't really expect him to, be part of that final 15. But I think, training camp will really have some, Brett will have difficult decisions to make in a way this year, that he hasn't had last year, because he's going to need guys that he feels can really contribute, 1 through 15 all the way down the bench.
Yeah, Michael, you talk about that final 15, but then they have a couple of spots for those two-way contracts. Maybe Shake could be one of those two-way contracts, but who do you think the other guy would be? If you put Shake as one of those, would you put Demetrius Jackson as another guy, or is there another name out there that has two-way potential? I mean, obviously, like T.J. McConnell, for example, can't be a two-way guy anymore, so that's why the contract non-guaranteed, you get into that discussion.
Right. It would probably be one of the younger guys. Maybe if they liked what they really saw out of, Isaiah Miles has been playing good. A guy like Cam Oliver has been, showing some signs of potential for the team during the summer league. If they felt like going, the two-way route again, with like a Furkan, something like that, I think one of the two of those spots will probably go to two of the guys that are currently on the roster right now, but are, the younger guys that they don't think are quite ready to contribute, obviously fully yet.
Does this roster crunch tell you that the team is a better basketball team, or does it just tell you that there's front office decisions that have to be made that are all coming to fruition at this time? Like, are they better because – is this an example of them being better, that it's that hard to get the 15th spot?
Yeah, I think it is, Pete. I think it's a little bit of both. I think, it's definitely an example of the front office having some difficult decisions to make, but I do think it's an example of the team getting deeper than they were, heading into the season last year. Now that, last year was a lot more of a question mark at this time last year than it was. Obviously, Ben still hadn't played a game yet. Joel was coming off an injury. I think last year, obviously, they really forged kind of their identity and established themselves on what they want to do. So now this summer, with Brett calling the shots in terms of being the GM and the foundational pieces already in place, I think they had a more clear idea of exactly what they were looking to do. And by doing that, they were kind of just able to stack the roster with guys that they thought, could be effective in the system that they like to run, whether that's guys that can space the floor or whether that's, versatile wings like a Justin Anderson or a Wilson Chandler. So I think that, going into the season, they're definitely deeper. And, of course, the roster in the NBA is something that's always changing. Obviously, they added Bellinelli and Irsan after the deadline last year. So there's still, plenty of room for moves like that to be made. But entering the season at this point, even if nothing changes, they don't trade for, let's say a Kawhi Leonard. If they keep this group right here, I think it's, it's definitely a deeper team with more options for Brett than he had, going into the season at least last year.
Michael Kaskey-Blomain, of course, the Sixers Summer League team, they won last night, so they'll move on. It was Zaire Smith against Mikal Bridges last night. Was there a winner in that fight?
I think, I don't want to be biased, I think Zaire looked a little bit better last night. I think Bridges only had maybe 7 points. I think he had a 3 and a couple baskets. But, Zaire, obviously, he hit a 3 in his face at one point. He got the steal at the end of the game off of Mikal. So, if it was let's say if that was a round of a boxing match, I think you could say Zaire took that one, which, of course, everyone on Twitter will take to mean they say Sixers won that trade hands down.
Right. I'll tell you, some of the guys, the 3 guys that I liked for the Sixers, Kevin Knox, Wendell Carter, and Gilgeous-Alexander, they have been 3 of my favorite players at the summer. They might be the 3 best players that have been there.
Yeah, Kevin Knox looks like a stud for the Knicks. He's going to be a guy that the Sixers are going to have to face for a while coming up. Luckily, they didn't have the decision of having to pass on him as he was taken before. But, Gilgeous-Alexander, too, with the Clippers is another guy that looks good. But in terms of Zaire, I think you're seeing pretty much everything that you could expect from a guy that was, basically the 16th pick. And I think he's a guy, too, that'll look better. It sounds obvious, but I think he's a guy that'll look better when the talent around him is better. He's not necessarily a guy like, Markelle was last summer in Summer League, where you give him the ball, kind of give him an ISO, and he's going to ooh and ah you and make these highlight plays. I think Zaire is more of a guy that's going to, kind of play off of Ben, be able to, benefit from Ben's vision, use his athleticism to kind of, cut, make plays like that. So I think we're seeing, what we're seeing from Zaire in terms of being able to knock down shots, his nose for the ball on the defensive end. I think those are all promising signs that are only going to, improve once you put him out on the floor with some of the other talent on the Sixers.
All right, MKB, Sixers Summer League could wrap up tonight. We'll see what happens with that as the offseason is quickly moving. Training camp will be here before we know it. You can follow him at The Real Mike KB on Twitter. Thanks, pal.
Thanks, guys.